Please welcome Ethan Diamond.
All right, thank you. Well, I feel like I got to start by telling you guys that we run Bandcamp as a virtual company. So we don't have an office. We're spread out all over the world, and for communication, we use a group chat system. We used to use IRC, and then we recently switched to Slack. And we try to be really disciplined about putting everything in there so that nobody feels like they're missing out on anything, no matter what time zone they're in. But one side effect of this is that even with my co-founder Sean, who sits directly across from me in this mostly empty shared workspace every day, we've gotten in the habit of talking to each other over Slack. So he'll come into the office, on a typical day, and I'll write, "Hey Sean, how's it going?" And he'll write, "Good." And I'll write, "You want to get lunch today?" And he'll write back, "Okay, I'm too busy." And then, and he's sitting right there. And 8 or 9 hours later, I'll write, "Okay, taking off later," and walk right past him. And if we're working on a big project, a big release, we can sometimes go for weeks like this. So when Andy asked me to do this, I realized that I'm basically used to talking to 0 people on a daily basis, and now I'm talking to 1,000 people, Andy? I don't know. Anyway, I'm suitably freaked out about that, so yeah. Is it okay if I'm going to pretend I'm just talking to you? That'll help me. What if I have to pee during this? What should I do? I'm gonna hold it. Okay. Okay. So, what's Bandcamp? So we started off as a service to help artists sell their music and merchandise directly to their fans. But then, as the site grew, and it's now at about 12 million tracks and 1.5 million albums on the site, we evolved into also being a destination for music discovery. But I would say sort of at a higher level, our objective is to be the best way for fans to directly support the artists that they love. So I think that listening to a song 10,000 times while you try to ignore an ad for toothpaste or whatever is not a particularly good way to support an artist. And neither is paying a subscription fee once a month to a multi-billion-dollar corporation that's partially owned by other multi-billion-dollar corporations, the major labels, and then just kind of crossing your fingers that they're going to distribute your money to artists fairly. The best way to support an artist is to pay them directly. I think, this is painfully obvious, right? The internet makes this entirely feasible, so we try to make this really, really easy. So an artist uploads their music to Bandcamp, a fan pays them directly for it, we take a small cut, it's about half of what iTunes charges, and then the fan gets the music streaming on all their devices where we have our app, and then they get also a high-quality download if they're still into that sort of thing, and also, of course, they get the satisfaction of knowing that they've directly supported an artist. So that's what we do. We're off to a good start with it. As Andy mentioned, fans have given artists $81 million to date, and they give artists about $3 million a month. And fans buy, on average, about 13,000 records a day, and that works out to about 9 a minute. Every minute of every hour of every day, it's all year long. And it's starting to have a real impact on artists' careers as well. So Zoe Keating is an avant-garde classical cellist. She's awesome if you haven't checked out her music. And she recently published her 2013 earnings. And 92% of her income came from music sales, and 8% came from streaming, which was Spotify, YouTube, and Pandora combined. So as you can imagine, when she published this, almost all of the media attention focused on this large difference between these two things. But if you actually dig into the sales numbers, I think there's a slightly more interesting story, and that's that her sales breakdown is 51% iTunes, 34% Bandcamp, 15% Amazon. And so her sales from Bandcamp, which she's integrated into her own site, so it's basically her fans coming straight to her and saying, here, have some money, and her saying, thanks, here, have some music. That's approaching her sales from the behemoth, from iTunes, and it's actually already more than twice as much as she makes from the other behemoth, which is Amazon. So I think this is exciting. I think it demonstrates that people want to support the artists they love, and you just have to give them easy ways to do that. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we got started. So back in 2007, there was this band from Eugene that I really, really liked, and I won't say the name because it's horribly offensive, but they made the decision to leave their label and release their next record independently, and I was really excited about it. So on the day it was out, I went to their site, and the site it didn't load at all. And so I thought, okay, this is a fairly popular band. I'll just go back the next day. And then it eventually loaded, but it was super duper slow, and it had this crazy Flash interface, which was still popular at the time. And I eventually figured it out and paid for the album, but then I didn't get anything. So there's a help, but my credit card had been charged. So there's a help address on the site. I wrote to that, and shortly thereafter, the lead singer wrote me back, and he sent me a link to the album, just totally open link, and so I got the record, and when I unzipped the zip file, there was no cover art. They were fairly low quality MP3s, and all of the files were named things like master3final.mp3, yeah. So basically, they ran into sort of every frustrating technical issue that you could possibly hit, and I think that as a result, very, very few people heard this record, and this it killed me, because I thought the music was awesome, and when you think music is awesome, you want everybody to hear it, and I really loved the band, and I felt like these guys deserved all of the success in the world. But as an independent artist, what choices did they actually have at the time? They could have done what they did, which is they spent a lot of money, they hired an engineer, they hired a designer, they rented some servers, and they ended up with something that basically didn't work. Or, at the time, again, they could have used MySpace or one of their dozen imitators. But those services offered artists what was essentially a sharecropping arrangement. You gave them your music, and then it was their logo, it was their advertising, it was their URL, it was their traffic, it was somebody else's identity entirely. And it just struck me as crazy that if you were a blogger, right, if your artistic output happened to be words, you had all of these awesome options available to you. You had Blogger, you had Typepad, WordPress, but if your artistic output happened to be music instead of text, your options just sucked. So that's why my friends and I started working on Bandcamp. We were kind of on, some of us were on the older side and had families, so we raised a little bit of VC money at the beginning, and by today's standards, I mean like a really, really tiny bit, like stuck between the seat cushions of the VC's Tesla kind of money. And we focused early on getting to profitability so that we could grow the business in a sustainable way. So we worked out of the public library for the first 4 years of the company's existence. Yeah, and we paid ourselves, sort of subsistence salaries, and we grew the business entirely by word of mouth from artists telling other artists about it, and we kept at it, we kept plugging away, and then a few years ago now, we became cash flow positive, and we've stayed that way ever since, as we've hired more and more people onto the team. Oh, and also, when we got to sustainability, I was very excited. So we marked the occasion by making a poster for the team. And if you guys haven't seen the South Park Underpants Gnomes episode, you must. It's from late 1998, sort of the height of the dot-com bubble. And basically, there are these gnomes, and they have a three-phase business plan. Phase 1 is collect underpants. Phase 2 is question mark, question mark, question mark. And phase 3 is profit. And it's basically relevant all over again, so go back to that one. So, okay. why is this idea of sustainability so important to me? We had people who were offering us investment money, and we would have enjoyed having bigger salaries and having an office, I think, but I felt strongly that if our goal with Bandcamp was to be an important part of how any artist develops a sustainable career, how can I possibly be taken seriously in that mission if I can't even make my own business sustainable? So I think about this theme of sustainability a lot nowadays in the context of what is obviously like the biggest trend right now in the record industry, and that's subscription and advertising-based streaming music services. So there's no question that those services are awesome for music fans, right? They let you listen to pretty much anything in the world for a small monthly fee. It's awesome. But you don't hear the same level of enthusiasm coming from artists, right? You hear about artists getting fractions of pennies and about the sort of lack of transparency and how those payouts are structured. And a lot of them are saying things that are similar to what Tom York from Radiohead said, who called subscription streaming the last desperate fart of a dying corpse. And then you've got analysts who are calling subscription streaming inherently unprofitable. And if you look at some of the stats, that actually appears to be true. So yeah, on this chart, what you're seeing is the dotted line is showing the user growth of one of the big subscription streaming services, and that green line going down to negative 80 million is their net revenue. So yeah, that doesn't look so good. And this one's similar. It shows the user growth of one of the big public streaming companies compared to their net revenue. It's also kind of scary. So even if you assume, though, that this is wrong and these services are going to get to profitability, won't the major labels that they rely on for content just demand a bigger piece of the pie when that happens? And how is that a good long-term business? How is that good long-term for artists? Well, the craziest part is that I'm not sure that it matters at all. So when Goldman Sachs put $50 million into one of these businesses not too long ago, were they betting on them getting to become incredibly profitable, or were they maybe thinking, hey, music is this awesome loss leader for selling smartphones and cell phone plans and subscriptions for free 2-day shipping on books and leaf blowers and toilet paper, so no worries, we're going to sell the company, turn a tidy profit, and welfare of the artist is like, what are you even talking about? Or maybe they were thinking, hey, we could use this giant pile of VC money to keep growing by undercutting existing businesses that have to make that silly profit thing, and we can go public and convince your mom and dad that we're the next Google and that they should invest. So this is a total aside, but I have to do it. So this is how this works out for mom and dad. So the blue line is showing the performance of a $1,000 investment in a public streaming company that I won't name. And the pink line shows the same investment in a boring index fund. So not only do mom and dad get the excitement of all that volatility, they end up with less money in the end. But at least they provided Goldman Sachs with a liquidity event. All right, so none of this really points to an outcome that is going to benefit artists long term. So, okay, on top of all this, shifting all of our music consumption to subscription-based streaming, I feel like it risks losing something that's culturally important as well, and that's the idea of a music collection. So the first record collection that I ever explored belonged to my parents, and when they would go out, me and my brother would go into the room where they had all their music, and we would start putting on records and pouring through it, and from that I learned about Jimmy Smith and Phoebe Snow and Buddy Holly and Dvorak, thanks to my mom, and yeah, then a little later in life, I discovered music by going over to friends' houses and dorm rooms and rifling through their CD collections, and just learned about a ton of new artists and bonded with some people for life, and shunned other people for life. and then along came the internet and the iTunes store, and then browsing a friend's collection became what's on your iPod, which isn't really as good, but at least, it's still a collection, right? I know that these records meant something to you because you took a limited resource, your money, and you spent it on them. But if we shift our music consumption entirely to subscription, where sort of everybody has everything, how do I know what is special to you? The services that do that, they can try to fake it by having a heart icon that you tap or a like button, but I feel like with the lack of any friction, the collection becomes essentially meaningless. And music discovery suffers, I think our culture suffers, and your kids are never gonna look up your 2014 Summer Jams playlist. It's not gonna happen. So the situation actually reminds me of where we were before the iTunes Store launched, and this friend of mine, this was, when LimeWire and Napster were the big things. And this friend of mine came over and he gave me 2 CDRs, and one of them said A through L, and the other said M through Z. To this day, I have not put these into my computer and looked at what's on them because it was meaningless. It didn't make any sense, and I feel like we're kind of right back there. But we don't have to be. I think it's great to use a streaming service for music discovery. They can be really, really good for that. But if you actually care about music and you care about the people who make it and you want them to keep making it, the best way to do that is to buy it directly from them or to use services that let you directly support them. So, not only is it more fair to the artist, but it has this really nice side effect, which is that it allows us to keep retain the concept of a music collection in the streaming world. So instead of this fire hose of your friend listened to this song or your friend liked this album, and those are things that I just could not care less about personally. You've got actually a collection of albums and tracks that people were passionate enough to spend money on and to actually support the artists who made them. And that friction is what makes something a collection. It's what makes something interesting for music discovery. So I realize that all of this may sound like wishful thinking, but the idea of buying music directly from the artist isn't like it's not like a throwback fantasy that I'm indulging in. There have been 11 million transactions now on Bandcamp, so that's fans directly supporting artists 11 million times, and the collections that they amass from that drive significant revenue to artists. We studied the spending of about 50,000 different people from the year before and the year after they made the accounts that let them share these collections. And on average, the spending doubled, twice as much money going to artists. And if there's any reason that this is catching on at all, I think it's because of a fundamental and, to me, really encouraging truth, and that's that people want to support the artists they love. It's as simple as that. And I think we see evidence of this on Bandcamp every single day. So you can set up your music on the site at a base price, but people can pay more if they want to. And across those 11 million transactions, people do that more than 50% of the time. And we often see fans paying 100 times the asking price. And at first we thought this was actually an internationalization bug, like comma versus decimal point. But no, it turned out we checked with the people and wrote them and said, what's going on? And it was true. So also, when you buy music on the site, you can leave a message for the artist you're buying it from. The most common message by far is fans apologizing for not giving more money. And it's not on like, dollar contributions or sales. It's people who already had given a significant amount. So this is pretty typical. I wish I had enough cash to support you more. I'm a working musician in Ohio, but thank you so much for being incredible. Thank you, it's not much, but I'm broke since I crashed my car. It's not much, but it's what I can afford. Keep up the good work. There's just, it's literally every day, and about half of all of these notes that get left for artists. So I'll give you my brush with tech royalty story real quick. So about 5 years ago, I was at a conference, not nearly as fun as this one, and Dick Costolo, who's the CEO of Twitter, was there. And from years and years earlier, when he was working on a project called FeedBurner, we had crossed paths, so I kind of felt like I could say hi to this guy. But because when we knew each other, it was like before pre-media Titan, and so we started talking. And he asked me what I was working on, and I started to explain Bandcamp, and he locked me in the eye And as I'm describing it to them, he began walking backwards like this, and then started talking to somebody else. And this sort of, to me, epitomizes the state of the record industry. It's like this train wreck that most people want no part of, right? But if there's one thing that gives me hope and it makes me an optimist about all of this, it's this. It's that people really want to support the artists they love. And if you tell your fans what the best way is to support you, and you make it really easy for them to do that, they will take you up on it. So this is a savvy audience, but we're still at a point where most artists aren't doing that. They haven't heard of Bandcamp. They have only a vague idea of what they can do on a service like Kickstarter. And their fans who really just want to do right by them are kind of left wondering, do I go to your shows? Because I hear most musicians lose money on tour. Do I set your music up to stream in a loop while I sleep? What do I do? And I hear these questions all the time, and I don't find it annoying at all. I find it really exciting. It means to me that the opportunities for artists are still huge, and I'm just grateful to be a part of that, so thank you.